we're very tech savvy these days, and we live stream to YouTube. So if you guys ever have an event that overlaps with something that you can't make, we do live stream it, and then we save the stream and post it the week after. So that's always a fun thing. We're pretty proud of that because Readers has not traditionally been very good at technology. So please enjoy the fruits of those labors. David is going to sign books after the talk, but he's signing them in the middle of the store and where the table where his books were on display. So the trick is always he has to get from there to over there, and everyone wants to chat and ask questions and so on. But we solved this problem, the counters in between. So you're going to buy the book there and then go over and ask him the questions. So figured that one out. Took us a while. So my name's Rosie. I am the co-owner of the store, and I run the events. And one thing that always intrigues me about working here and having grown up here is how related the environment is to where we live. Like, not only are we an agricultural community, we are people who care about the agriculture around us, and then where, it's sort of hard to say this, where we can actually thank our agricultural success from. We have that very special aspect of the Bay Area in that it has so many resources, and it has so much that we can offer the area and the area can offer us. And there's something so special about the Bay Area. I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of people about what the definition of the Bay is. Like, what are the Bay Area? People will come here and they'll say, like, oh, I'm from the Bay. And I'm like, yeah, me too. Like, come on. We're all in this community here. And I think David's book really covers a lot of what makes that interesting, about what makes this whole around the Bay interesting, from North Bay all the way to Santa Cruz. Which I think really gives us a perspective on how broad the area is and how much it matters, but also how tightly knit we are. So David's going to tell us a lot more about it and give us a good sense. You can give him a round of applause.
Thank you. My book is quite new. It came out in November, and this is my fourth book talk. And I am going to have to look at my notes a little bit, but I just want to say welcome and hello. I'm glad you're here.
And where's your book? You're not holding it up so we can see it.
It's back on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, we got plenty of copies. In the course, I worked on this book for 3 decades, and in the course of doing the research and the writing, I found things that you could hardly believe. But they're true stories reported by eyewitnesses over the past 257 years. Things that have transformed the Bay Area's environment. Let me give you just a few examples of some of the stories that are in this book. One involves a Mexican general, Mariano Vallejo. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He fought more than 100 battles against Bay Area Indian tribes before the gold rush. One North Bay tribe, which lived just north of Healdsburg, fought so tenaciously with Stone Age weapons, including actual stones, that the Mexicans named them Los Guapos, meaning Spanish for proud, brave, and fierce. And their descendants today are still known as the Michoel Guapo. And I met a couple of them in September. They're still here. In the early 1800s, people saw hundreds of grizzly bears roaming the oak savannas of the Santa Clara Valley, the Napa and Sonoma Valleys, the East Bay, and even San Francisco's Ocean Beach, where they feasted on the carcasses of dead whales. Imagine that. In the 1850s, Mountain Charlie McKiernan was one of the men who made his living by shooting deer and grizzly bears in the Santa Cruz Mountains and selling them to meat markets in San Francisco. One day a grizzly surprised him. He fired his rifle. He missed. The bear took a piece out of his skull from his forehead and left him almost dead. he survived. And for the rest of his life, he wore a hat with a broad brim, with the brim low over his eyes, so that no one could see his deformed forehead. But the grizzlies did not survive. With no limits on hunting, by the 1890s there were none left in the entire Bay Area, except for one, William Randolph Hearst's lonely bear, Monarch, who lived behind bars in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Now let me tell you just two brief stories about fishing. In 1823, when the Spanish priest Jose Altamira was walking around the North Bay looking for a good place to build a mission, he asked the native people along Sonoma Creek if the creek had fish. And they told him there were plenty of salmon in the creek. So he built his mission a half a mile away from it, about 100 yards from here, near some springs that provide fresh water. And that's why Sonoma is here today. In 1880, fishermen in the Bay and Delta caught more than 1 million salmon. So many fish that the canneries could only can half of them, and the price of fresh salmon in San Francisco fell to nearly zero. For 3 days in September, they caught so many salmon, they couldn't sell them at any price, and threw 9,000 dead salmon back in the water. During the gold rush of the early 1850s, San Francisco residents saw half the city burned to the ground, not once, not twice, but 5 times, because there was no piped water and no fire department. They quickly rebuilt the city, bigger and better than it was before, just as they did after the city's next catastrophic wildfire in 1906. During the gold rush, and for nearly a century afterwards, hundreds of Bay Area men labored deep in underground mines, producing not gold, but the highly toxic liquid metal mercury. One of these mines, the New Almaden, south of San Jose, produced more wealth for its owners than any California gold mine ever did. And in this book, you'll read the story of more than a dozen mercury mines that once existed in the nearby Mayacamas Mountains. That name, Mayacamas, does anyone know where the name comes from? There was once an Indian village in the Napa Valley between Calistoga and St. Helena that was called Maacama. And the people there were called the Maacamas. And so the nearby mountains were named Mayacamas. A generation after the gold rush, farmers planted millions of plum trees in a place called the Valley of Heart's Delight, surrounding the small city of San Jose with a sea of 8 million white blossoming trees in winter and spring. And then, much later, in just 20 years, from 1950 to 1970, the booming tech industry transformed these vast orchards into Silicon Valley. Starting in 1900, oil refineries were built on San Pablo Bay and Carquinez Strait, fueling the cars and trucks that increased exponentially decade after decade. But one night, in the first week of May 1922, a gasoline spill at the Rodeo refinery set the surface of San Pablo Bay on fire. The Crockett newspaper reported that, quote, the whole surface of the sea seemed to be on fire, and the air was heavy with smoke, even as far as Crockett, all morning, and with the fumes of burning oil. This was the first oil spill that I'm aware of. You can read about more of them in the book. Amazing as these stories are, you'll get much more in this book. There's also the essential context for these stories and many more. Who was involved, how it happened, why it happened, and how it all connected to transform the open landscape of 1769, the year when 2 Spanish soldiers on horseback accidentally discovered the bay into the Bay Area we know today. You'll learn about the century-long struggles of environmentalists who refused to listen to the conventional wisdom that said, you can't stop progress, even when it was destroying the landscapes they had come to know and love. They saved the redwoods. They stopped the diking and filling of the bay with tons of garbage, which I saw with my own eyes in the 1960s. They stopped freeways. They saved hundreds of square miles of parklands, farms, dairies, and cattle ranches. They showed time and again that ordinary people can make a difference. Their leaders included San Francisco's Laura Lyon White, the unknown heroine of Muir Woods, and the 4 women who founded the Marin Conservation League, and Kay Kerr, Sylvia McLaughlin, and Esther Gulick, who founded and led the Save the Bay movement in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. But in the early 1960s, it seemed like these small groups of environmental activists had little chance of stopping the air and water pollution, rampant urban sprawl, and freeway building, and construction of nuclear power plants along the coast. The activists kept trying anyway. In 1962, a left-wing songwriter from Berkeley named Malvina Reynolds saw row after row of box-like houses under construction on the slopes of San Bruno Mountain, just south of San Francisco. She wrote a song with a catchy tune that helped turn the tide of public opinion against this kind of land development in the Bay Area's open spaces. It goes like this. You probably heard it, if you're over 60 like me. Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes, all the same. There's a red one, and a blue one, and a green one, and a yellow one, and they all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And there are more verses. You can find them on the internet. A decade later, in Petaluma, Mayor Helen Putnam passed an ordinance limiting the annual growth of that city. When developers challenged it, she went to court to defend it, and she won a ruling that allowed all cities and counties to limit their growth, enabling local activists throughout the Bay Area to put urban growth boundaries in place, which is why the Sonoma Valley never became part of one gigantic city that would have stretched from Petaluma to Healdsburg. All the cities of Sonoma County have urban growth boundaries now. Here in Sonoma, the voters approved one in the year 2000. At Bodega Bay in the early 60s, Rose Gaffney didn't want to sell her land so that PG&E could build a massive nuclear power plant on it. But PG&E took it anyway through eminent domain. They soon gouged a circular 70-foot deep hole in the ground for the nuclear reactor. Malvina Reynolds wrote another song to help environmentalists fight it. The lyrics went like this: "We've got to take over PG&E. It's become a dreadful pest. They're spreading atomic poison stuff all over the Golden West. They're starting a plant at Bodega, a place that was wild and pure. They call it an atomic park. It's an atomic sewer." That song did not make a difference. But one rainy weekend in early April 1963, local activist Doris Sloan pulled up to the nuclear power construction site on Bodega Bay with a geophysicist, Pierre Saint-Amand. The gate was open. No one was there. They walked in and found an earthquake fault in the hole, only a quarter mile from the famous San Andreas fault, which had caused the great San Francisco earthquake of 1906 that also devastated Santa Rosa. A year later, in 1964, PG&E was forced to abandon the site.
Yay.
And now it's a 70-foot deep duck pond, but people still call it the hole in the head. bodega head. It was front page news all over the Bay Area. Environmentalists throughout the region learned that they actually could win, even against all the power and money of PG&E. And the Save the Bay movement of the 1960s actually did save the Bay. Thousands of environmentalists urged the state legislature and Democratic Governor Pat Brown and a Republican actor-turned-governor who succeeded Pat Brown to pass laws to ban bay filling. And they passed those laws, and they're still in effect. Back in the mid-60s, I saw this actor-turned-governor starring in the TV Western Death Valley Days, and I'm sure you all know Ronald Reagan. In the 1960s, the Bay Area's environmentalists laid the groundwork for the environmental movement that swept America after the first nationwide Earth Day in 1970, passing laws that cleaned up polluted air and filthy waterways nationwide over the next 20 years. In the late 1960s, Sonoma County environmentalists like Petaluma's Bill Cornum failed to stop construction of the Sea Ranch on the coast, but they didn't give up. They joined the movement to save the entire California coast with an initiative passed by the voters statewide in November 1972, California Coastal Initiative. And it's been working for more than half a century to preserve our dramatic coastal lands and waters from the Mexican border to Oregon. In San Francisco, when the federal government offered to sell Alcatraz Island to the city in 1969, and the Army was getting ready to shut down 3 nearby military bases, Amy Meyer and Edgar Wayburn founded People for the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, passing a law in Congress in 1972 that turned all these areas and much more into national parks. In the 1980s and 1990s, the Bay Area led the world in developing solar and wind power, leading to the spread of clean power systems worldwide over the next 30 years. Technologies that today are crucial to replacing fossil fuels that are causing global warming. And during the past 30 years, Bay Area environmentalists, scientists, and civil servants in federal, state, and local government agencies pioneered the new science of wetlands restoration, transforming thousands of acres of salt production ponds, including what are now the Napa-Sonoma marshes, into habitat for birds, fish, and endangered wildlife like the salt marsh harvest mouse and the California clapper rail, which is a bird. For the past century, Bay Area residents have led the nation in environmental protection. And it's not just activists, but millions of voters who passed the bond propositions and property taxes to put their tax money to work. Even as the Bay Area's population has grown from 1 million in 1900 to nearly 8 million today. If you've ever lived in the Bay Area, these are your stories. There are many more in this book. There's really something for everybody, from hunters to historians, from builders to biologists, from students to anyone who wants to know where their drinking water comes from, or how recycling got started, or what happens to their toilet water after they flush. This is the biography of your region. And now I'd like to open it up to answer your questions. So, if you don't have questions, I've got questions, and you can choose the question and ask me.
That's very interpressive.
Here are the questions.
I did just think of a question.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
This is like fun trivia.
That's how it does.
I think I know the answers to these.
Okay, so I do have a question for you. It's
Sure.
about Highway 37. So you know, Deer Island, which is out there, which used to be an island, used to be surrounded by bay water,
Uh-huh.
just north of Highway 37. So it used to all be underwater there. What were they thinking when they built Highway 37 at that level? That it wouldn't flood?
They thought that the sea would never rise. That's what they were thinking. And how could they know? This was like 70 years ago.
But I mean, it was underwater back in the day. It was all underwater.
Right,
Long before sea level rise was a thing.
right.
What?
Well, they filled it, and there's a lot of, filled and diked land in the Bay Area that people put to other uses. And, they thought that it would last forever, but in some places, it's not gonna last forever due to sea level rise.
And every time it rains hard,
Right.
But I just was wondering, I mean, it just seemed not very forward thinking to build
Well,
that.
it wouldn't be built that way today.
Okay, thanks.
More questions? Yes.
You said that you worked on this book for a couple decades. Where did you get most of your source information from?
I can't say that there was, one or two sources that provided most of the information. I worked at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for almost 30 years, and my office did a clipping service for the rest of the employees, in which we clipped out articles about environmental stories all over the region that we covered, which included the Bay Area. And so I would just rip off the ones that were about the Bay Area, put them in a file. But we also had a library, and at that library we had a lot of books on environmental topics, reports, old government reports. One of the most useful was one that had to do with the history of the Bay Area's fish and wildlife, and fishing and hunting. And it was put together by a guy with the California Department of Fish and Game in 1962, a guy named Skinner, I forget his first name, but it really was a tremendous source, which you can't find anywhere anymore. I happen to have a copy of it, but I kept going back to the EPA library time and time again. I would read the bibliographies of books and reports and find items in these bibliographies that were relevant to the Bay Area, and then I would request them from the EPA library, and they would get them from any library in America by interlibrary loan, and soon I would have them. So I just kept on doing this year after year, from 1994 until last September. Of course, I retired in 2021, so after that I was just clipping the San Francisco Chronicle. Yes?
Couple of questions. I guess the one that's most on my mind, what do you think of the EPA now and what's happening to it under this administration?
Oh, boy.
Well, what's happening to it under this administration reminds me of a scene in the movie Chinatown, where Jack Nicholson is the star, Jake Gittes, and he is a private detective, but he used to be on the police force. And another person asks him, you used to work in Chinatown? What did you do there? And he says, as little as possible. That's what the EPA is now doing, as little as possible. And I can only hope that they will come back in the next administration.
Well, depends on who's in the next administration. But I hope that you'll send a copy of this book, not that he'll read it, but to the White House.
Well, no, that won't do any good. But I sent one to Ralph Nader, and if I'm lucky, I'll be on his nationwide radio show.
Good.
The Ralph Nader Radio Hour, KPFA, Mondays at 11 o'clock. You can also find it on the internet because it's a podcast, the Ralph Nader Radio Hour. But I'm trying to get on the radio shows in the Bay Area too.
That's
Well,
good.
I'm gonna ask one of your questions. From 1907 to 1962, what wildlife species would hunters kill to collect a bounty from the state anywhere in California? What was,
What animal would you guess that is?
a wolf?
No, not a wolf,
Bears. Bear?
not a bear,
Ah,
because
okay.
bears were extinct in the Bay Area at that
By
time.
that time, okay.
There
But
are
this is
some,
all California in this one, so.
yeah, this is California wide. In fact, yeah, the grizzly bear was extinct in California during that time. What other animal?
Coyote.
Nope,
Gophers.
nope. What
Nobody
other
knows.
animal scares the hell out of people if you ever meet
Oh,
one?
mountain lions.
That is correct,
Oh.
mountain lions. There was a bounty on mountain lions
I see.
until about 1963. And an artist in Big Sur, Margaret Wentworth Owings, waged a personal campaign to end the bounty on mountain lions. And she succeeded with the help of well-known environmentalists like David Brower, who was head of the Sierra Club at that time, and the author of Silent Spring.
Yes,
Rachel
Rachel
Carson.
Carson.
Yeah.
I have to comment that just from your talk, I'm hearing a lot of women's names as being
Yeah.
activists,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting.
Well, for many decades, women provided most of the leadership and the volunteers for the Bay Area's environmental groups. And it has, it changed over time. In the early days, like back in the 1920s, there may have been more men involved, but even at the beginning, there was a lot of women involved, such as Laura Lyon White. And she was married to a banker named Lovell White. This banker owned Muir Woods, but actually it was the bank. He personally didn't own it. The bank owned Muir Woods, and it was his job to sell it. And Laura Lyon White was the head of the Bay Area's Save the Redwoods organization, and she put the bug in Lovell White's ear to make sure to sell that Muir Woods not to any other buyer other than William Kent, because he's the only buyer who would save it, who would buy it but not cut it down. And he did buy it, and he did save it. He donated it to the federal government. The other,
What about the striped bass and the shad
Number
that
11.
were East Coast?
how did
How'd they get
striped
here?
bass and shad get here? They came on the train.
The tree.
They came on the train. After the Transcontinental Railroad was built and finished in 1869, the Federal Fish Commission and the California Fish Commission, which are government agencies, they got together and they said, we need to improve the fisheries in California. Let's bring some East Coast fish over to the West Coast and put them in the bay. And they did, and they're still there. And the striped bass was, they called it the greatest achievement in acclimatization. That was to introduce non-native species. There was a whole movement in which they tried to introduce, people all over the world really were trying to introduce different species into other places to, enrich the local environment with non-native species, some of which became invasive pests, but some, like the striped bass, were successful, and they, provided a lot of fish for people to eat. Unfortunately, they do eat baby salmon, so it wasn't good for the salmon, but both fish have survived to the present day. Yes?
Is that the turkey story too?
Oh, the turkey story. Yeah. The California Department of Fish and Game thought that they could do hunters a big favor by importing turkeys into California. There weren't any turkeys. There never were any turkeys in California. It was native to east of Colorado. And there were, turkeys in various states. So they tried importing turkeys from one state and they all died, and turkeys from another state, and they all died. And they imported some turkeys from Texas, and they left. And now they're everywhere. And the California Department of Fish and Game would never do that today, because of the environmental impacts of introducing a non-native species, but at the time they did it, in the 50s and 60s, they thought it was, you know, wonderful that they were helping out hunters by importing turkeys. And now, of course, you know, we've got thousands and thousands of them, and they're pests.
Yeah.
They compete with the local birds for food. So there's less local birds, and there's more turkeys. And you can't even eat them for Thanksgiving dinner because, you know, in the urban areas and the farms and the state parks around here, you can't hunt them, you know, unless somebody who owns a piece of, you know, private property on a farm, you know, invites you to come in and shoot a turkey. So that's why we got so many turkeys.
What are your top 2 recreational places to be in our Bay Area?
In the whole Bay Area, well, I'm gonna say the first one that comes to mind is Big Basin State Park. That was California's first state park, and it was established in 1904 by the Save the Redwoods movement that started in 1899. There are 3 waterfalls there that you have to hike 5 miles to see, but it is well worth the effort. It's called Berry Creek Falls, and there's 2 more falls called the Golden Cascade and Silver Falls. They're all within half a mile, and one of these waterfalls, the biggest one, is shown in the book in a big full-page photo. So you'll see that in the book. It's in the Parks and Land Conservation chapter. And let's see, second one, my favorite, Marin Headlands. That's like, it's been like my backyard for decades. I love the Marin Headlands. And I lead a wildflower hike there with my wife, Serena Enger, every April. And it's on the Greenbelt Alliance website. It's going to be April 11th or 12th. If you're interested, you can sign up a month from now on the greenbelt.org website. And I actually met my wife on that hike in 2013. And now we lead it every year.
What about the eggs?
I was gonna ask that too.
The eggs.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, the question is, if you were in San Francisco in the 1850s and 1860s, and you ordered eggs at a restaurant, or you picked up eggs in a store, where would the eggs come from? Well,
I think from the island.
not Petaluma. Not Petaluma.
From the island.
Nobody was growing eggs in Petaluma at that time. They came from the Farallon Islands,
Yep.
where there are millions of seabirds laying hundreds of thousands of eggs. And they just scooped up those eggs and brought them to San Francisco. And those were the eggs that everyone was eating in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, before the Petaluma egg industry got going. And of course, that depleted the millions of birds, so it became tens of thousands of birds in the Farallon Islands, and they're still recovering from that over-harvesting of their eggs. Any others?
Yeah, how did they taste?
How they taste?
Very fishy, no?
I understand that they were larger than chicken eggs, and they were delicious.
I mean, people do eat duck eggs.
Right. Right.
Oh, what incident in a coastal town south of San Francisco gave Alfred Hitchcock the inspiration for the birds?
I'm really glad you asked that question.
That's number 2.
Back in 1961, August of 1961, in the middle of the night, in a small town, Capitola, a couple miles south of Santa Cruz, all of a sudden, seabirds started to invade the town, and they flew crazily all over the place, hitting cars, hitting windows, biting people, and dropping dead. And it was so unbelievable that a policeman who was there had to get out of the car to see it for himself, to make sure that he wasn't imagining this. It was like a hallucination. All these, birds flying crazily everywhere, hitting people, biting people, and then dropping dead. The next day, hundreds of dead birds were, on the streets and in the gardens of people in Capitola, and no one knew what caused it. It was truly a mystery. And the film director, Alfred Hitchcock, was in Santa Cruz that summer. He read all about it in a newspaper, and he thought, wow, this is an idea for a movie. And it became The Birds. And 30 years later, no one knew how it happened or why it happened until 30 years later. Some researchers at UC Santa Cruz were studying dead seals and sea lions that had washed up on the beach. They found that these seals and sea lions had died of poisoning by domoic acid. And that is a neurotoxin that is created by toxic algae. There are toxic algae blooms every year, usually in August and September. And these seabirds, they're called sooty shearwaters. It's not the local seagulls, but these sooty shearwaters, they migrate constantly all year long. And for them, it's an endless summer. They just go on this gigantic figure 8 throughout the entire Pacific Ocean, from coast to coast to coast to coast, following the coastline in a way that keeps it always endless summer for them. And they just happen to be here in late August. Well, they're always here in late August, off the coast of Santa Cruz, and they ate a lot of fish that had consumed the toxic algae. And so it poisoned the birds, and they flew crazily all over Capitola and fell dead. Yeah, and unfortunately, I've seen those birds, migrating. They're going southward along the California coast in August and September, and I saw them once, and it lasted half an hour, just more of them and more of them and more of them. Unfortunately, it's less of them now. They've been reduced in their population. I'm not sure if anyone knows why, but they're still out there. There's just not as many of them.
I have a comment. I love your book because, well, it's very big. It's very heavy. You can just pick it up and you can flip to a page and learn something new and read a page, and then the next day you can go and read a completely different section just by opening up and not having to even keep a bookmark. So that's what I love about it.
All right, well, thanks. I appreciate that comment. And I also want to go back there and sign books, but if you buy the book and you want to know what's in it, just go to the table of contents. There are 20 chapters, all listed in the table of contents, and each chapter is a different topic. For instance, the first chapter is the history of native tribes of the Bay Area. Now, this is hard to believe, but it's true. There's never been another book that put together the history of all the native tribes in the Bay Area. You can buy a book called Chief Marin that tells the story of the tribes of Marin County, but you can't buy a book until now that tells the story of all the tribes in the whole Bay Area. And so you just look at the table of contents in the front of the book and choose a topic that you're interested in, because each one covers a different topic. And then you can plunge into whatever you're most interested in, read that, and then when you're finished, you can find another one. And I don't expect everyone to read all 20 chapters, but if you read 1 or 2, you'll probably read 5 or 6.
I'm just curious, what is your biggest worry about the Bay Area now?
My biggest worry about the Bay Area is sea level rise and the complete and total failure of the Trump administration to do anything that would help that problem. And in fact, they're working to make it worse by keeping coal burning power plants open.
Yeah.
But yes, sea level rise is probably the greatest threat to the Bay Area, the greatest environmental threat to the Bay Area.
Thank you.
How do you define the Bay Area, from where to
Oh.
where?
Well, yeah. Most government agencies define the Bay Area as the 9 counties that touch the bay. And so it includes Solano County, Napa County, Sonoma County, all the way down to Santa Clara County. Well, I included one more, Santa Cruz, because there were several stories, really important environmental stories in Santa Cruz County that needed to be part of the Bay Area story because they were, connected in many ways to the Bay Area. So, like the formation of Big Basin State Park, it's in Santa Cruz County, but the movement to create Big Basin State Park was mostly people in the rest of the Bay Area, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara counties. So I included all the land from Watsonville all the way up to the Mendocino County border. That's what my book covers. And waters too, out to the Farallon Islands. And now, let me sign some books for anybody
Thank you very much.
who's interested.